Hey everybody, welcome back to the Football Savant podcast. Travis Tyler, Tyler Williams. Today we're talking weeks 8 and 9 of the NFL season for 2022. So, Tyler, first one I want to jump in. I know both of us didn't see much of this game, but it was a key game for the NFC standings, particularly in the NFC West, which is the 49ers and the Rams.
Yeah, we didn't see a lot of it. I went back and watched some more of it afterwards. Not to plug the NFL Plus app, but I'll give them a little bit of a good job there.
Can
But
we do that? I'm gonna have to check with the lawyers here.
yeah. Good point. Did not watch it there. I pirated it. Maybe that's worse. I don't know. No, it looks like the Niners are starting to find their groove. Jimmy Garoppolo, we know when Trey Lance was there, they asked him to, he could work out, but didn't give him the playbook and stuff. They fully intended on trading him or cutting him. So it looks like he's getting in his groove. And then they made the recent trade for McCaffrey. Obviously, he had a LaDainian Tomlinson historic game there. It really looks like Shanahan is starting to get creative again, and he's able to dive into the playbook. And the thing I struggle with, though, Travis, is it more of that, or is it more of the fact that the Rams are just so depleted on the offensive line? That Allenson Robbins signing, I thought was going to be such a good. I mean, I praised that. I drafted him in every fantasy league I could.
He's
And
been
it's just
MIA completely.
he can't get open. He can't get separated. And they're on their backup linemen. I mean, it's so I don't know really what to take away from it. Are the Niners getting that much better, or are the Rams that bad? I mean, but it was a pivotal matchup and a great win for the Niners.
Yeah, I think, for me, that division right now is Seattle and San Francisco. I think LA is playing their way right out of it. Arizona hasn't even been in it to begin with.
Yeah.
And as much as I've loved the guy's whole career, Stafford's been awful this year. Their offense in general. I mean, it could be the offensive line that they have no running game anymore. I mean, the offense in general is just. I wrote down. Let's see. Oh, last year, I don't have the stat for last year off the top of my head, but they were clearly one of the best offenses in the league. They're
100%.
averaging under 17 points per game this year.
Gosh, dude. So let me ask you this, Travis, because you watched Stafford for a long time. I forgot about that, being a Lions fan.
And we have the draft pick this year because of that.
That's right. That's right.
So keep losing.
Yeah, you're all for it, dude. So, and I know you probably haven't watched a ton of Rams, but what you have seen, is this a Stafford issue? Is this a McVay issue? Because there has to be times where he's played with bad O-lines and outside of Calvin Johnson had receivers that couldn't really get separation. What are you – is there any telltale signs that when you watch it, Travis, that you go, that looks different from the Stafford that I've seen?
Yes. I think his arm strength, number one, just doesn't look like it's the same thing anymore. When Calvin left, he didn't have big-time receivers that could get open or whatever, but he would throw them open. And he's not doing that anymore. Like, you could never question whether he could fit a ball into a spot.
That's very true.
This year, even if it got intercepted, there was some level where you're like, okay, he probably could have fit that in somewhere, and it wasn't quite a dumb play. Now he just can't fit anything. He doesn't have the same strength, and maybe it was that elbow surgery that they talked about he had right before the season. Maybe he doesn't have the time in his pocket. I don't really know, but it just doesn't look like the same guy that we were watching for all those years in Detroit and last year in LA.
Yeah, that's a great point, Travis. I think a lot of us forget that, I mean, because the Rams did a good job, as they should, of minimizing the elbow issue. But I wonder that, because it's so weird for a guy that's coming off a Super Bowl win, that was part of one of the most explosive offenses after he got traded, to fall off a cliff that quick.
Yeah.
We're talking, 7-8 months later. The guy's not 40,
he's always been talked about as a big arm too. It's always been one of the elite of the elite arms. And
I know it's not baseball, but it's also a great point that you bring up, Travis. A lot of those games in Detroit, they're behind, so they're not running the football. He's chucking it 30, 40 times.
Also had nobody who could run,
so
but
sure, while it's not baseball and he's on a pitch count, I'm sure that adds up.
No, he definitely, over those years, clearly throwing 45, 50 times a game in most games, and can't be doing that in the NFL and expect to last that long.
Yeah, you
Even
could
though,
always count on watching him throw 55 balls on Thanksgiving, which was always fun.
yeah. Well, I mean that's all they had back then. That passing game was fun to watch, but
It was.
their offensive line in question marks back then, and we could do a whole. I mean, I could get into that for a long time. I'm not going to waste time on that right now.
I'm sure you could. Well, let's do this. Speaking of teams that are struggling and teams that are looking good, let's move on to the Bills-Packers game.
Okay.
That game I did watch. Man, the Packers just look so different. And I know they lost Devontae, and I know that that was a very big part of it, and they didn't really replace him. But man, you would think that even with that, the one thing that Rodgers has always been very good at is that play action, and they've got two really good backs, Travis, and it just seems like they get down so quick, and that defense was, I think, supposed to be a lot better than we thought it was.
Yeah.
But they get down so quick that they're just not able to use Aaron Jones and Dylan the way that they should. Of course, the Bills, Josh Allen looks, inhuman sometimes. I mean, what was your takeaways from that, Travis?
Yeah, well, with what you mentioned, the running backs, I think in most games, teams are starting to not trust Green Bay's receivers so much, so they'll stack the box and start playing more against Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. Rodgers usually can make them play, but he's not the one that can catch those balls out there. You need somebody to catch them for him. I will say the second half in that game, at least, I don't know if it was garbage time or whatever, but it's the best the Packers offense has looked in a while.
Have some life to them there.
It's weird. Yeah. It's weird that it comes against probably the best defense in the NFL, or one of the best defenses in the NFL.
100%. I thought that was strange too. And
yeah,
I mean the Bills had a lead, but I mean I think for all intents and purposes the starters were out there. I mean garbage time, but they did seem to have some life out of them, and they were doing the things that we saw that they've always done. They got Robert Tonyan involved. It looked to me, Travis, and maybe this is just my perspective, but it looked like, and some of the other Green Bay games I've watched, is they've got these young guys running these deep routes, and they got Aaron throwing these deep balls, and they're just not connecting on them. The second half of that Bills game, they started to run, get the tight end involved more, get some shorter stuff going, which opens up that deep stuff. And for some reason, it just seems like they've really gotten away from that. And the other thing that always confuses me is Aaron Jones. I mean, he can catch out of the backfield. I don't know why they don't get him more involved in the passing game, Travis.
I think it's really just the fact that Rodgers is used to having that vertical passing attack and looking downfield, and Jones has kind of been a check down option for most of his career, even though he can turn those into gains. And then I thought on the defensive side of the ball, they made Josh Allen look somewhat human for the way they play. I mean, he threw 2 interceptions in this game. That doesn't happen for Josh Allen very often.
Not at all. Yeah. So very good, very good point.
It's progress on their part, whether it sticks around for a week or if it's good enough to last and build on with the rest of the season.
Sure. So do you think that, based on what you've seen, do you think that the Packers are still in the thick of it for an NFC playoff spot? Or do you think that this season's just going to be really tough and they're going to have to just build upon these young guys' confidence?
Outside of the division winners, there's a lot of wiggle room. Like, there's no one running away with wild card spots. Yeah, exactly. Well, like you have Philly and Minnesota probably going to win the divisions, but Dallas and even New York could have something to say about Philly. But those are 2 wild card potential teams there too. And then you have Seattle and San Francisco out in the West, and somebody has to come out of the South. So there's no one. I mean, the Falcons are first place in the South right now. That's ridiculous. Yeah, we might get a little more into that later. But
that's going to be a tough one. But you are right about that.
There's no one. I mean, what does that leave you with? That's 5 playoff teams, so there's 7 teams. Yeah, I mean, that leaves you, not too many teams fighting for those spots. So I guess no one's technically really out, except for a few teams. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, we'll keep an eye on that for sure. Let's go to the next game, Browns Bengals.
that was a
These are two,
shocker. Yeah,
yeah, and these are two teams that I just struggle with because I don't know what they are. Because you look at the Bengals, and the week before that, Joe Burrow had 300 yards at halftime. They look like they were back.
yeah,
Each week he's been taking less sacks. The offensive line, not a great run blocking line, but they've certainly gotten much better at protecting Joe Burrow, and it looked
right.
evident of that last week. Then you go into this week in the Browns every other week with Jacoby Brissett. I don't know what to make of them. I don't know what
Hmm.
to make of them when Deshaun. I don't know what they're going to be when Deshaun comes back. These are two teams that I just really struggle with, and I'm going to be honest with you. This game didn't do anything to give me a fixed opinion on either team. Travis, did you see anything out of either team that helped you decide what they were?
A little bit, nothing too like. I think Cleveland at this point, we'll see if it changes when Watson comes back, but they're going to go as far as their defense really takes them. Like they were all over Joe Burrow, um, in that for the entire game. I don't know how many sacks they had, but he had no clean pocket, fumbled
None.
the ball, throwing interceptions. It was just that affected the offense for Cincinnati big time, and it also didn't help that they didn't have Jamar Chase out there. Um, Even though they
Yeah.
have such a deep receiving core, it shouldn't matter that much. It apparently it did,
No, it
and
clearly did. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and then for Cincinnati, their defense just didn't show up. Like they had the offensive line problems, and the defense didn't. For the past couple of weeks, we've said that they're finding their footing and everything, and they look like they're about to be back. That defense was not very good last Monday night. Yeah, what is it? Wednesday.
Which is
Yeah.
strange because they didn't really lose anything on
Mm-hmm.
defense. And in fact, the biggest piece that we were looking at the offseason was Jesse Bates, who ended up getting something done to come back and
Yeah.
play. So I don't know where the defense is lost. I mean, same defensive coordinator.
They
I don't know. It's a confusing year for Bengals fans, I'm sure.
they did lose some guys at defensive tackle, but pretty much
You are right
same,
about that. Now
pretty
thinking
much
about
the
that, yeah.
same defense. I mean, there's no big drop off compared. So I'm with you. I mean, I've never thought they were a great pass defense. You had Hendrickson rushing the passer, but that's So I've always thought their secondary was exposed a little bit at times.
And that's a great point. That
Yeah,
was their formula last year was they
yeah,
got ahead because of that passing attack and Joe Mixon. And then the defense and Trey Hendrickson could pin their ears back when they had a
yeah.
lead and just go get the quarterback. But now it seems like they're mostly playing from behind or tied, so
Yeah,
it makes it tough on them.
and I think that's why they spent a lot of draft capital in the secondary because it was kind of a weakness for their defense on the back end last year. Just giving up points and giving up passing yards.
Yeah, great point. Speaking of additions, what a wild
What a
trade
good transition.
deadline.
Yeah.
We had the most trades on a NFL trade deadline day in NFL history. Travis, just off the top of your head, and obviously there were a ton of moves. Who were some of the winners and losers that you can think of off the top of your head?
You got to put the Dolphins in that win column with Bradley
100%.
Chubb in there. Even though they did have to give up a first round pick in there, he's a Pro Bowl pass rusher. You don't get too many of those, and
Young,
they're clearly going for it. Yeah, by all reports, he's going to sign an extension there.
just
So
saw that.
that's a huge one. The Bears got a number one receiver, Chase Claypool, put him with Darnell Mooney and whoever. I still don't know who else is still playing there, but that highlights the need even more.
Yeah,
His potential. He's shown that he's a number one. He can be a number one receiver. He just hasn't quite been that the past year and a half or so, I would say. And then the Jaguars. I mean, I know Kelvin Ridley's not playing this year, but they gave up a conditional draft pick to bring him in there when people were talking about him being one of the best receivers in the league. I mean,
yeah, they gave up nothing.
it's either gonna be somewhere between round 2 and round 6, and that's about the conditions. I don't know exactly what it's contingent on, but and then I guess you got to go with the Vikings. I mean, what were they missing on that offense was the tight end. They get T.J.
Yeah.
Hawkinson. My one of my buddies who's a Packers fan was texting me. He was like, "Why the hell did you guys do that?"
In
And
division.
I see the reasoning behind it. At the same time, I don't really like it. It's not the way I would operate. I like it for the Vikings. I don't like it on the Lions and giving up the extra draft picks that they had to add in there. I thought
that part was a little
Uh-huh.
weird to me. I would think if you're going to give up a cornerstone young tight end who's produced the way that Hawkinson was, it would strictly be a return. You're giving up Hawkinson, and you're getting
like
so when I saw the trade,
second and third round pick
confused.
for Hawkinson made sense to me, but
Yeah,
adding in
the
two
exchange of
fourth
picks
rounders,
there on top of that in division.
That's the only thing I had a problem with in that was giving up those. I mean, you add a second rounder this year, but you're also giving up your fourth rounder from this year. So you didn't add any new picks necessarily.
No.
And now you don't really have a tight end. I get that he only had one more year left on his contract after this year, and they weren't going to pay him $15 to $16 million a year.
And you're more than a TJ Hawkinson away.
Yeah, exactly. You need, I mean, they're still in the draft capital point, so I didn't like, or the draft capital, building through the draft kind of philosophy, and so I didn't get why they would be willing to give up those kind of draft picks at the end of that.
Yeah, I agree. I had the same winners, Miami, Minnesota, especially that offense. Kevin O'Connell's going to have some fun. That's going to free up a lot of space for Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, even Dalvin Cook. Hawkinson's not a bad run blocker, and they just lose.
He could be better, but you're right on that.
Yeah. Sure. But you lose Irv Smith, who's probably a little better run blocker, but not as great as a receiver and consistent as Hawkinson. So I think that's a win. The other win I would have is I think Nyheim Hines to Buffalo could help them. That's going to give them an added receiver out of the backfield that I think they can have some fun with there. Losers, I think not getting Rodgers some help in Green Bay, especially when it sounds like Houston was so open to trading Brandon Cooks. I almost would have put money that Brandon Cooks to Green Bay would have happened. Kareem Hunt not getting traded. I thought for sure he may have got moved to a Buffalo. And the other one is Cam Akers and the Rams. It seems that's a situation where the Rams aren't keen on him. He doesn't want to come back and play. Okay, cut your ties, and if you're the Rams, you pick up a pick or two or whatever, and you move on from a bad situation. And if you're Cam Akers, you get it just seemed like that made sense, and some of those trades just didn't come through to fruition.
Yeah, and I thought Carolina had some assets they could have sold off that would have just brought in a king's ransom pretty much.
Yeah, and listen, you're absolutely right.
I get what they're saying, but
and
it's an opportunity.
You're 100% right. Now, listen, I like Brian Burns, and I think he's really good. But
they offered 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, what are you keeping him for? I mean, 2 first-round picks. I mean, I'll take my chances on a Will Anderson or something. I mean, don't get me wrong. I really do like Burns, and I think he's good and he's young. But if it's me, man, and I'm sitting there in Carolina, give me the 2 first-rounders. See ya.
Yeah, you offer me 2 first-round picks for a guy that's in his 4th year. I mean, I mean, he's a good player. I don't think he's made a Pro Bowl though, or been an All-Pro or anything.
No.
So, I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer to take that deal. But they like him a lot. Tyler, how about your Raiders here? What are we thinking on McDaniels so far?
Yeah, listen, I'm much like you last week when we talked about Detroit. I'm not one of those Raiders fans that thought we were going to the Super Bowl. I think we made some nice moves. I don't think it's time to fire McDaniels. I'm not impressed with it so far. I have a lot of questions. But here's the thing, just like when Gruden came in and he got rid of Amari and Khalil, and people were upset, listen, and we just came off a playoff win or appearance with Jack Del Rio. Listen, 60% of the teams that make the playoffs don't make it the next year. We were not set up at that point in time to be perennial playoffs. Same thing, you fast forward to this year. McDaniels comes in. We're coming off a playoff appearance. We were not set up to continuously make the playoffs. I would rather not necessarily tear it down, but I'd rather take a step back to take a couple steps forward and be perennial playoff contenders every year. And I just think that's so tough when you have a whole new coach, whole new system. I mean, there's so many pieces, and we had a, again, like I said, mentioned with Hawkinson, we were not a Devontae Adams and Chandler Jones away from making a Super Bowl. So, and on top of that, I don't think you can fire McDaniels, because after all the turmoil last year with Ruggs and Gruden, the NFL, you get the move to Vegas, you need some stability there. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, Ziegler, our GM, is a package deal with McDaniels.
Yeah,
I don't think you can be a couple years into Vegas and be on your second GM and your third coach in a few years. So I definitely have questions, because you look at teams like the Giants and the Seahawks and Atlanta, who are certainly less talented and supposedly less qualified head coaches, and they're performing better. But I think you just got to give it time. I mean, we've got some assets in cap space. Raider fans, calm down. We'll figure it out. We're going to be all right. We got talent, but I don't think it's time to pull the trigger yet.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of canning a coach after 1 year, no matter what, because it takes more than a season to instill that culture and everything that he's trying to build there. And I think that's one thing that, not to harp on anybody too much, but that Houston's been doing lately. They've been recycling right through coaches, and there's it led to the firing of their president and everything. It's just, there's no basis or foundation there, and that's not what you want for a team.
And you're right. You're absolutely right, Travis. And one thing that really made me realize that even more is I watched the Pivot interview with Devontae Adams before the season started, and they asked Devontae Adams about the offense, and he said, man, this is the most complex thing. And Derek Carr echoed those same sentiments about how tough that offense is to learn. So it's going to take time.
So Tyler, going into this week, what games are you looking at? It's a pretty solid schedule. You got, Chargers, Falcons, Bills, Jets, Rams, Bucks, Tennessee, Kansas City. What are you looking at?
Yeah, there's definitely some divisional matchups that matter. I do like the idea of that Atlanta game. I'm curious to see what they are. Arthur Brown's doing a really good job with what he's got, which isn't a whole lot. And I still like to watch Seattle. I mean, Seattle's playing really, really well. So there's some big divisional games that, of course, all the moves after the trade deadline as well. I'm excited to see these guys in their new homes. Jeff Wilson, these guys kind of get settled in and see what has. So lot to talk about on next week's podcast for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, that's NFL talk for this week with Tyler Williams, Travis Tyler. We'll be back next week with the Football Savant podcast. So thanks for watching.
Do it all. Like, subscribe, do it all, man.